Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl. When BMW said that they wanted the competition line to be something in its own right rather than just a special model within the M series, a few people raised their eyebrows. After all, the performance end of BMW are already known for making some pretty spectacular cars. So were they going to be able to bring enough extra to the party to justify the existence of a specific M5 competition? Let's take a closer look and find out. BMW really wanted to make a statement with this car, and it's clear to see why. On top of the massive engine that it's equipped with and enhancements made to the driving, the suspension, the steering, pretty much every single component of this vehicle, it doesn't come with a small price tag. More on that later. So it's pretty important that when you have one and it's sitting on the road, that people understand just what it is you're driving. And I think the front of this car very effectively conveys that. Look at this grille. It's nice and aggressive. We have piano black double kidneys. Now, if you ever look at any of the styling of these things and think, but why is it exactly that way? With the performance models, it's always about air intake through the system. This has a huge engine behind, and it's really important that as much air as possible comes in through those vents to allow it maximum performance. Slightly lower down, we can see these equally aggressive shapes and a really nice angularity to the whole of the front design. The bonnet swoops down, and as you can see, it's nicely cut straight into the kidney design itself. So even before we've taken a look any further back at all, we know that there's something just a little bit special about this car. That aggressive styling carries right through into the side. Look at these 20-inch special wheels. They really do look the part, don't they? And they are hiding some significantly uprated brake calipers. Those are an optional extra, but more on that a little bit later on. Now, as you can see as we swoop further back past the lovely M5 insignia and these piano black mirrors. Now, I want Michelle to have a look at these a little closer up. I very much like the individualistic styling that BMW have put on these, but as is always the case, I'm not completely convinced about the piano black. We've only had the car for a couple of hours. There are already a multitude of dead fly remnants plastered all over this, as you would expect. So it looks wonderful when it's fresh out of the showroom, but it doesn't stay looking that way. So if you are a person who likes to keep their car spotless, you may want to keep a cloth on board just to address this. Coming slightly further back, take a look at this. That is a carbon fiber finish on the roof. If that doesn't reinforce the sporty feeling, I don't know what will. Add to that these very, very dark rear windows, and you have a very executive, stylish appearance to the car, tapering off with this beautiful line at the rear and then swooping through these design lines right to the back. Now, if you're thinking to yourself while you're looking at this car, something a little different about that to the standard finish? Well, of course there is. Every single individual component of this car has been rethought through in order to make sure that the driving experience is optimal. 7mm lower is now the overall effect on the chassis. That's because of everything being completely rethought through. These wheels have an increased camber on them, and that's to enhance their cornering potential. At the back, we now have ball joints instead of the traditional rubber mounts, and again, that makes the drive that little bit tauter, more responsive and more aggressive. So I can assure you, if the drive is as aggressive and as stylish as the appearance, this car is going to be one that you need to take a closer look at. Coming through to the rear of the car, that aggressive styling doesn't stop, but it's nicely finished off, so I don't think it's too overstated. Now, this is an exclusive color just for the 5 Series, and it's going to be called Frozen Dark Silver Metallic. Bit of a mouthful, but I think you'd have to agree. It really matches the styling of the car. Again, with this piano black, we have a nice discreet lip, and that just breaks up visually the back of the vehicle. This fantastic competition badge, and then look down here. For once, this is a place where I really enjoy seeing piano black used to its full effect. It really shows off these lovely enamel exhausts and this fantastic large air diffuser to its absolute maximum. Now, all of this car is still going to require you to have somewhere to put all of your things. Well, at least you need to make some sort of pretense that you're actually using it for something other than driving very fast in. Let's take a look and see how the boot does. Well, I think it might take our camera just a little bit of time to adjust to the light in there. That is 530 litres of space. It's huge. Now, if the camera doesn't do a brilliant job of showing you just what that looks like, I'm going to take one for the team and show you myself. So, if I climb in here, that's my head touching the back of the seats. So Michelle can show you as my body fits. You can agree that if Thomas wants to get rid of me, he's going to need to still make a couple of folds in order to fit me in here, but there is more than enough space for him to do it. I'm going to come back out again now to show you some of the features. We've got some nice luggage holders down here and mesh storage pocket back here with a little spot below for a first aid or tool bag. So okay, it's not the most equipped boot you've ever seen, but come on. It's cavernous in terms of your ability to be able to fit things back here. There's plenty of room. And don't forget, the seats fold down as well. Oh, Michelle's just showing me. We have, of course, the ability to unlock the seats from back here, but they do not automatically fold all by themselves. So I'm going to come round and fold them down so you can have a look at that. Well, the seats don't fold completely flat. I'm just checking to make sure that's not because we left luggage in there. But look how much space we have now. So now I'm happy to tell you that if Thomas wants to fit me in the back of the car, I'll go more than easily. Let's take a look at what is a very crowded engine bay. Ah, that's an awful lot of engine. What you are looking at is a V8. It's producing 625 horsepower, 750 Newton meters, and it will do 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in just 3.3 seconds. Not enough info for you? Well, you can take it all the way to 200 in just 10.8. It's got an 8-speed Steptronic gearbox, and it will do a top speed of either 250 or 305 kilometers per hour, depending on whether or not you opted for the driver's pack. And come on, let's be honest. If you're going to buy this kind of car, I think you're going to need the driver's pack. Well, that is an awful lot of engine. I love the carbon fiber top here. Everything is so nicely laid out. It just looks perfectly optimized for performance, which of course is exactly what it is. Unlike the M2 Competition, we do have a little bit of deadening on here. But honestly, with an engine that size, I think if you didn't, you'd be able to hear it from many miles away. So it's a nice inclusion, and it does reinforce the quality feel of the car overall. I think it's about time we found out how it drives. I think it's time we had a look inside. This is the key, which as you can see is a little bit more designed than a standard BMW key. We have more options on here, in particular the remote access to the boot. Let's have a look inside and see what the car delivers. Well, clearly this is an executive car, and I think BMW want you to know that from the second you open the door. Everything about this feels and resonates quality, but it's also nice and subtle. Look at this carbon inlay in the door itself. That's nice and discreet. It doesn't shout at you, but it does resonate quality. And that really is the experience right throughout this car. Everything your hand touches feels nice. Now, this is a small detail, but I think I want to show you anyway. If you come down here to the door pocket, look at the amount of attention that's been put into that design. It's been maximized in terms of the space, and you can see that we have a little storage area back here, a nice big water well, but it doesn't look too big. So everything's been really nicely proportionally designed in order to make sure that you can maximize the most out of the materials that have been used here. We've got the standard settings for the driver also fitted in here. We've got two different options, so you can have things set just the way you like them and make sure if somebody else is using your car, it doesn't interfere with you. Now take a look at the controls for the seat down here, and that's a good chance to have a look as well at our M5 door sill, which is very nice. There are plenty of things you can do with this chair, and I think it could take you an awfully long time to find exactly the right position for you. I'm going to take a seat in it and see how comfortable it is. Well, I am 5'10" or 178 centimeters. I have a long torso, but as you can see, as you'd expect, I have huge amounts of headroom here. So this is a very comfortable car to sit in. Now, the seats are very comfortable, but I can tell you, obviously when you design a car like this, you are going to be slightly compromised, and the reason is it is an executive car. So I need to feel comfortable driving this for long distances, and it needs to be comfortable for passengers. And it's extremely comfortable. But it's a competition, and that means it's all about the drive. So I have to tell you, when you take it out on the racetrack, although the seats are comfortable, they don't hold you quite as close as you would like. And that's obviously always going to be something of a compromise in an executive car that is designed for driving. But that said, it's a nice compromise between those 2 points. It is very comfortable and it does still hold you in place. The driver's experience of sitting in the cockpit is an extremely pleasant one. All the materials are very high quality. I mean, in fairness, you would expect that at this price point, but it's nicely delivered. The lighting cluster up here is discreet. Again, we have a nice discreet mirror. Having spent a lot of time driving this car, I can tell you that the layout and the use of space is very nice and not distractive at all. You really keep your focus where it's supposed to be. Talking of which, if I can get Michelle just to look here, this is the head-up display just behind the steering wheel, and it works really, really well. Head-up displays are one of those features of cars that are not always really fantastically realized. In this car, that's great, because as we'll see in a little bit, there's so much real estate here to draw your attention. Honestly, it's very nice to have a just simple bite-sized piece projected onto the road in front of you, and the way that's delivered in this car is excellent. Let's have a talk about the steering wheel. Well, as you would expect from BMW, they know a thing or two about designing steering wheels, and this is no exception. Now, we spent the day before this car driving around in the M2 competition, and I have to say, that steering wheel is a little bit more my taste than this. Why? Well, this is pretty big. It feels very solid and chunky. That is in keeping with the car. Obviously, this is a big, heavy piece of metal, so you want something substantial to hold on to, and that's certainly how the steering wheel presents. I would have liked it a little bit smaller, I think, but I have small hands, so that's hardly surprising. I think if you're a normal-sized human being, then you're going to enjoy this just fine. Let's look at the controls. They really deliver a fantastic performance. My favorite feature of this car in terms of the controls are absolutely these two buttons right here, M1 and M2. What do they achieve for you? Well, while you're driving, you don't really want to have to root through 90 different menus in order to make various selections about which of the many features of this car you can change and control. So these are two presets, essentially. You can set these up for your favorite settings. I say that because you want to drive the car standardly. A bit more sport, M1. Oh my goodness, I'm going to blow all the leaves off the road. That's what M2 is for. And brilliantly, or I think so at least, if you want to activate M2, you need two presses. M1, only one, two presses. Why? It's because you can turn off a lot of the safety features if you want to program this for your ultimate sports mode, if you will. So it's really important to make sure that's definitely what you want while you're driving through Croydon town centre. They work in a very nice tactile way, and what I find particularly impressive about the steering wheel is that in no way does that impinge upon your ability to access the other control. These paddles are absolutely a pleasure to use when you're out on the open road and you really want to get some of that driving experience for yourself. You can obviously put the gearbox in a mode where you can select your gear for yourself. Put that in conjunction with the head-up display in sports mode where you can see the rev counter. hear the engine note, it really is a combined, extremely pleasurable experience. Similarly, these controls for both the digital display and the infotainment system are intuitive, they're simple, they're not complicated, and they're very straightforward. We drive a huge amount of cars at Autogefühl. These work in a wide range of different capacities. Many cars you think, wow, it's going to take me a long time to get the hang of. This is very straightforward to pick up, really enjoyable as you would expect. The quality throughout is really nice. This aluminium trim feels great. When you touch that while driving, it gives you that solid, reassuring feel that you want. So, thumbs up, BMW. Nice job on the driver's experience. Now, let's take a look a little bit through the wheel and see how that resonates with the display. Well, as you can see, this is a very sporty car. So we're clearly going to want dials that recognize that. Whilst we have a digital cockpit, you can see these raised lines here. These are actually raised plastic, and they just help to emphasize, if you will, the mix of new and old. I can display the information I want. I still have that really binary, visceral feeling that you get from those old analog dials. It's stripped down digital. They really want to deliver a driver's experience to you. Look at this kind of angry red expression on the dials. I think that's a superb job of communicating to you. Yeah, okay, it's an executive car, but go ahead, take some of the controls off and just enjoy the drive. Well, while we're talking about interior design and the fact that this is a driver's car, you can imagine there's a bit of a complicated compromise happening here. What do I mean by that? Well, because of the fact this is a performance car, we really want to keep things as uncluttered and simple as we possibly can. Because this is an executive car, we clearly want to have as many things to be adjustable, changeable, to get the environment right as possible. So it's very difficult to convey all of that in one package. This is what BMW has done to achieve that within the center console. This touchscreen here is really nice. It's not bothersome at all. I know a lot of people don't like these prominent displays, but I have to tell you, it's really nicely visually worked into this dashboard. So while you're driving, it does give you the information you want without bothering you at all. And it's very high quality. It looks and feels great and is very responsive. Well, you'd expect that at this price point, but it's very nicely delivered. Slightly further down, well, you can see one of the optional extras that we have down here is these are a ceramic black. Traditionally, they come in aluminium. That's going to cost you a little bit more. It's a nice touch. I don't know how important it is, but it helps add to the overall feeling of sophistication. Now, this, I would say, for my taste, is the least well realized section of the controls. You could argue it's the least important. I'm going to show you what I mean, but in order to do that, I'm going to start the car up. That offers us the opportunity to listen to that lovely engine. Okay, now I don't have this in sports mode at the moment, so we have a nice discreet engine noise, nothing too overblown. I like the way that this information is delivered, but I have to tell you, turning the fan on and off and up and down is a bit of a headache, at least to begin with. Michelle and I have more than a little bit of experience of changing fan speed and noise in order to do the filming, and we like cars that allow us to do this quickly and easily. Now, as you can see, these buttons are quite similar, and you don't really want to be staring at this closely. This is how you would increase the fan speed. Here, this is how you decrease the fan speed. Now, while I'm stationary, that looks extremely stylish and nice. I mean, I like the way that I recognize the touch with this color that's happening on the fan. You can imagine what a complete nightmare that would be if you are hurtling down a country road just thinking, oh, I need it a little bit cooler or a little bit more fan. Well, there is a way around that. We found that this max AC button is easy to locate and easy to operate. There we go, on off. But in terms of making those fine adjustments, and here we have heated seats, that takes a little bit more finessing. Well, I think you're going to get used to that. And as I said, it's a very difficult compromise to make sure that you're keeping this uncluttered, stylish, nice looking, but still with a million different features that you can change. So I understand that's pretty challenging. Let's look a little bit further down. Well, we have a nice discreet center console here. I think I'm going to turn the car off. There we go, just to give us a bit of peace and quiet. Nice discrete center console. Again, nice use of this carbon right throughout the car. Some of it's proper carbon, some of it's carbon look, but it all does give us that nice feeling of quality. Everything you touch is really good. Look at the action of that. It might seem like a small detail, but if you're going to spend a lot of money on a car, you really want it to resonate quality everywhere, and I really enjoy features like that. We have an inductive charging pad back here for a mobile phone with, of course, a USB connector, and then some nice straightforward cup holders here. Nothing crazy, but they really work nicely. Now, this is what it's all about. This is our gear stick, and this allows us to switch between, you know, dynamic modes where we can select gear ourselves or direct and let the car do it for us. It feels nice, it's high quality, it feels good in the hand, and it's very easy and straightforward to use. Electronic parking brake back here. Now, you'll be familiar with me talking a lot about the different driving modes at some point in this video. This is where we can access the most simple and straightforward things to change. I'm not sure if from there Michelle can get a shot of the digital display while I push one of those.
I can.
But I have 3 things I can change. The engine, and I can't do that unless we are switched on. Okay, so I have the ability to change the engine between different modes, the chassis and the suspension, there we are, between different modes, and the steering profile between different modes. Now, that is distinct and separate from just selecting a driving style. That means we really can mix it up to make sure that we get the driving profile very easily what we want it to be. Now, I really like the way that that's delivered in this car, because in many cars you might say, well, I have various different driving modes and we're never quite sure what they adjust. In this car, pretty much everything is adjustable. But who wants to be digging through 19 menus when you're driving on a certain type of road in a certain type of condition? It's a wholly reasonable thing to think, I might maybe want the steering a little bit more responsive without affecting the suspension. I might really just want a bit more performance from the engine without changing my steering. And this allows you quickly and simply to change just those 3 things without worrying about everything else. Very easy to access, very straightforward, and the way the information is delivered to us is great. Slightly further down, well, come on, it's not going to be a competition without this. This is the exhaust sound. You want more? You can have more. Just push it here. You're driving through town and you don't think you really need it? Okay, you can take it off again. Coming back, obviously, we have the electronic parking brake. And I think that this, our driver command console, is a huge step forwards. This works brilliantly in concert with the central infotainment system, and this just offers us one of 3 ways of accessing it, or 4 if you include speech. It feels so natural to rest your arm here. The jog shuttle wheel works great because we have a very nice processor on board. Everything is intuitive and fast. It's so responsive. It's such a pleasure to use. And these central options here on the wheel are so easy. I really like these indents because it makes it very simple, very quickly to learn where each of these buttons are and to access them without bothering to need to look at it. As you'll know, that is so important while you're driving. Again, standard this car comes with aluminium trim around here. This is ceramic effect, so darker, a little bit more conservative. Come on, if you're going to buy one and you want to distinguish yourself from your friend, it's a nice way just to say, haha, I got the option and you didn't. Let's take a look a little bit further back. Well, we'd expect to have good center console storage, and we have plenty back here. We've got a 12-volt charge point and another USB, and that's going to come in handy for our passenger's phone. But we're not all done there, because as Michelle just reminded me, we have extra. Let's take a look in here. Well, it's not really the best, most equipped glove box that I've ever seen in terms of space, but I think it gives you everything you need, and in fairness, I want the most amount of room I can get as a passenger to make me feel nice and comfortable. We just popped the car on to show you the rear view camera, and I think this just demonstrates how much cars are now beginning to benefit from the increased power of the processors that they're fitting them with. Look at how intuitive and nice that is. It offers you every opportunity to pick whatever form of information works best for you. We can clearly see this nice information being shown to us about what risks are ahead. This is a much more traditional rear view camera display, and we can see our suggested path if we're on full lock there. It really is nice because you get all the information you need very simply in a very responsive, quick and easy to digest manner. We always like to bring you the stereo, of course. Now, you can upgrade that to something other than the standard Harman Kardon that it comes with, but honestly, I think this is more than sufficient. One of the keys of executive vehicles is the sound deadening has to work, and they've done a really nice job with this car of achieving that, which means the stereo can be heard without any cluttering from the engine or the road noise itself. Okay, you can always spend more if you want to, but I think this delivers more than enough in terms of what you can want from your stereo. A little bit more detail on the seat. Again, it's difficult for me to show you anything on this chair that isn't adjustable. It looks extremely conservative, and that's nicely in keeping with the executive nature of the car. Unfortunately for us, you can only get them in leather. I think that's a bit of a shame. It would be nice to see some more options there, but in terms of character, it does suit the car very well. This is the only thing I'm never quite convinced about. We have an illuminated M5 badge right in the middle of the headrest. Well, the branding is consistent right throughout the vehicle, so that's either going to be your thing or not. I just feel it's maybe a little overkill. I would have liked something stitched into the head seat that was just a bit more discreet, but that's personal taste. Come on, if I can afford to buy one of these cars, I guess I kind of want everybody else to know that I can too. Well, that's the front of the car, and I'm pretty sure we can agree that's a very nice experience. So come on, let's have a look and see what it means to be a rear seat passenger. Well, as with any executive car, the backseat experience is very important. Now, Michelle has spent more than a little bit of time in the back of this car on a racetrack, and I can tell you that that's not the standard way in which you would interact with what's back here. But he managed to do all of that without losing any of the food that he's eaten. So I can tell you, even under those conditions, it's actually pretty comfortable. The seats are really nice and firm. Let's talk space. Okay, well, I am 5'10" or 178 centimeters. I do have a long torso though. And if you have a look at my head, Michelle, you can see that I have just enough space back here. That swooping roofline of the car is going to cost a little bit of headroom. But I do have a long torso, so I would say if you are under 6 feet and under in height, you're still going to have plenty of space back here. I really like the firmness of these seats. That rewards you over longer periods of driving. And look at my legroom. Well, let's not forget this car has the driver's seat set for me. I have very short legs. If we have a look at the passenger seat, relative to my legs, you can get a sense of a realistic legroom here. There is plenty, and there should be. It's nicely delivered. Here we have the rear drive axle tunnel. It's nice and discreet. It's not too outstanding. And I really like the styling of these rear heating and cooling controls. There's a nice little storage shelf down here. And we don't actually have, oh, there we are. 2 12-volt charge points. So no USB, but we do have the ability to plug in anything that we want. We've got anchor points for 2 child seats. But I think we know that most of the use of this car is going to be for executives. And that shows really in all of the features that you have back here. These cup holders are quite nicely delivered. And I think, there we are. We have the ability to access the boot, or of course, to store our golf clubs when we want to make sure that they're doing okay while we're traveling between A and B. So, Michelle asked me to point out to you, because we don't have particularly the ability to show you in this lighting, but we do have ambient lighting back here, as it is on the driver and front seat passengers doors as well. It's discreet, it's subtle, it's very nicely delivered. Good sized deep pockets here for good storage in the back. It's a very comfortable, nice experience. And if you have a look, Michelle is just showing you some water bottles there so you can see how much storage we have. If you have a look at the back of these seats, it's just really stylish and nice. It's always a pleasure for me in an executive car to see something that isn't a net backing on the seat, because you're not really going to store things back here in this kind of a car. You want the ability to maybe have a map or something, but it's just a nicer finish. It resonates with that quality. The overall effect is stylish, conservative, low key, and really very comfortable. I don't know about you, but nobody's ever said to me, the BMW M5, sure, it's a nice car, but I wish it had a bit more power. Well, apparently somebody said that to BMW, because the BMW M5 Competition now comes equipped with 625 horsepower, 750 Newton meters of torque, and a V8 monster. What does all of that mean? Well, let's take a look. This car delivers 0 to 100 in just 3.3 seconds. If you want to take it all the way to 200, well, that's going to take you a little bit longer. But the power and distribution is unbelievable in this car. It's clearly been designed with the idea that as well as driving on-road, you can clearly take it onto a racetrack, and we're going to have the opportunity to do that a little bit later on. But for now, we really want to get to know this beast a little bit more intimately. How does it drive? Does anybody really need this kind of power? And what exactly would you do with it if you had it? Well, let's find out. If you have quite that much power in a car, it's pretty important to understand how you're going to be delivering it to the wheels. And the mechanism in this, the M5 Competition, is going to be...
Prepare to keep right.
Thank you. Is going to be an 8-speed Steptronic gearbox. So what does that mean in real world terms? It means you have a very smooth, effortless deliverance of power which just switches between gears without you even having to spend a second thinking about it. Needless to say,
In 200 meters,
I think we're going to
follow
stop her from talking. That's a lot better. So needless to say, that is an astonishing amount of power. And as we all know, power is nothing without control. So how do we manage that? Well, BMW have gone through every single configurable option you can possibly think of for this car. That means you can change just about everything in terms of the driving dynamic and how it feels to you. Sometimes in cars with multiple driving modes and multiple adjustments you can make, that all feels a little bit much. One of the nice menu options is the M setup, and that is for configuring these two handy buttons. And if I just click on one to give you an idea as to exactly what that means, that I can pre-configure so my favorite driving profiles are ready to immediately access, I can change the DSC, the M drive profile, that's the four-wheel drive function, more on that a little bit later on. The engine performance, do I want that set for efficiency or sport? The chassis performance, do I want that to be stiff and responsive or a little bit looser? The steering, the transmission, even the head-up display can be adjusted to give me the full experience that I want. Now, clearly, you aren't going to want to be digging into all of these things while you are busy driving. And it's going to be an absolute joy for you to get used to all of these individual settings and exactly what you want to go with. But what that means in terms of our driving experience for right now is that we are set to M1, and that's a nice balanced profile, but trust me, gives you more than enough power. So talking about power, standardly the driver's profiles come with four-wheel drive setting, and it's really a bit of a mental challenge to understand what BMW mean exactly by four-wheel drive. Why is that? Well, as close as I could figure it out, I said to the engineers, so it's kind of a reverse Haldex setup. That made him look quite distressed, and he said, well, no. The reason for this is that what we have is the vast majority of that power being delivered to the rear wheels. As we know from BMW, this is a very typical setup. Why it leads to even weight distribution, and as you may or may not know with BMW, that is a signature part of their design. However, it's not four-wheel drive in any traditional sense, but what it does allow is for power transference to those front wheels, and they just basically help to keep the whole system in check. What does that mean when you translate it to real-world driving? Well, it's crucial. This is so much power that if you choose to switch it off, and you can, I suspect many people will find themselves parking this car somewhere that it just shouldn't be left. So the front-wheel drive aspect really adds a phenomenal level of control. What's so impressive about the way that it's delivered in this car is even with that selected, even knowing that you have full DSC and full controls being given to you while you're driving, BMW have made an astonishing amount of achievement in still letting you know that this is, at heart, a rear-wheel drive car. and you're always just slightly on the edge of where you think you might be losing control, where you take full advantage of that power. Needless to say, that makes the drive extremely fun. But, as Michel will tell you, because he ate lunch not so very long ago, as a passenger, sometimes you don't want to experience that. So, we have 3 buttons immediately down here by the console, and those allow me to make the adjustments to any of those individual aspects that I want as I'm driving along. What does that mean? It means if I'm having fun blasting through the countryside, but all of a sudden I need to go pick up my grandmother, and I don't have that quite pre-configured, I can quickly and easily select any one of those, which is engine performance, chassis performance, and driving characteristics to comfort. And what that will do is allow me a much more relaxed ride. Now, let's not kid ourselves. This car was designed for sport driving, and that is absolutely what it tells you. It doesn't really matter what mode you have it in. You can't hide the fact that this is a beast. But what it will do is make it just a little bit tamer. And I think that's important because however much you love driving this car quite the way it was designed to be driven, you're still going to need to take it down the shops now and then. And let's be honest, not everybody needs to know quite how much you have sitting underneath that bonnet. On that note, we also have another button back here which will allow us to change the sound of the exhaust. At the moment we're in standard, but if I pop this down, that is a little bit more exhilarating. Now the road that we're on at the moment doesn't allow me to really quite push this car as far and hard as I might like to. Well, don't worry, we have a racing track, so we will be able to see exactly what this car can achieve later on. But in the meantime, as long as you're not trying to push it to the limits, I'm happy to tell you that it is an entirely achievable goal to drive this car comfortably and to make sure your passenger isn't wishing that they didn't have that extra dessert for lunch, Michelle. But in the meantime, I think we're going to go for making the best of both worlds, because there is absolutely no sense in the world having this much engine on board unless you're taking full advantage. So I've made the car as comfortable as it can possibly be for the driving experience, so I can tell you a little bit more about how the car feels to drive. What that means is I've put the engine into efficient mode, and that's achieved simply by pushing the engine mode selector. I've put the suspension and the chassis into comfort mode. Again, you just push one button to achieve that, and the steering is in comfort mode. It's still taut and responsive, don't get me wrong. This is a big, heavy car. So with that, you have a big steering wheel. Now, let's talk about the seating position first. Well, as I said, it is a very big car, but that does afford us a lot of glass. And that means that as I look around, I still have very good all-round visibility. Mirror placement is excellent, and I really have a feeling that I know exactly what's happening everywhere that I'm driving. And that's crucial in a car that has this kind of power. You really need good all-round visibility. Seat position is nice. You can raise and lower. There are many, many different adjustments you can make, so you can find the perfect design for you. I find it a little bit of a compromise, if I'm honest. What I mean by that is, I think BMW are well aware that a lot of people buying this car are going to use it as a tourer as much as they are as a fun car to and from the office. And because of that, we have a lot of what I would call depth of comfort to the seats. Now that's nice when you're going at a leisurely pace, but it doesn't feel quite as responsive as you might like it when you are in full sports mode. Now, of course, not everybody's going to drive the car that way all the time, so it's nice to have that additional comfort. And I am happy to tell you that these side bolsters hold me in place nicely while I'm finding out what the car can deliver around bends. But I think I would have loved, ideally, to have seen some sort of a nod to that in the seat setup. This isn't a cheap car, and I think it would have been nice to have had the option to have flipped those seats from standard use when I put the car into full sports mode to deliver me a little bit more of a tighter experience. But that's just me, and I am being quite picky. The road visibility is excellent. Despite the size of this car, and it is big, we have a very good sense of where the end is at and a very nice driving position low down within the chassis itself. So we have a good feeling of control. Despite all of that massive amount of power coming straight through to the wheels, we also have excellent brakes. Now, we have the larger ceramic brakes on this car, and that means we have a fantastic stopping ability. Really, quite superb. When you have a significant amount of straight line speed, and as we have here, very uneven, very winding roads, you really do get the opportunity to see just what your brakes can deliver. And I haven't found anything to be wanting so far in any of the modes. The same absolutely applies to the steering. It's crisp and precise even when you are in comfort mode. What's really nice is that although the car is heavy, they haven't taken all of that weight away from the steering. So you do have a sense of exactly what it is you're asking of the car when you throw it into a corner at speed. And I think that's important because it's much more likely to make for a safer driving experience. The steering wheel controls are very intuitive, easy to access, and it's fairly straightforward to get what you want while you're driving. One of the features in this car that I rarely use in a car I'm driving, that I swear I would use every day if I owned this one, is the speed limiter. It's simply accessed just by pushing the button, and then you can adjust up and down with the left thumb drive on the left hand side of the steering wheel, and that is absolutely superb because I'm telling you, with this much power at your disposal, it is very, very difficult to drive slowly. I was driving through a 50 zone slightly earlier. At 50, thanks very much to the speed limiter, and Michelle said to me it felt like we were parked. That's just how impressive the performance is of the car. So I appreciate how easy that is to access. The gear change is so effortless that you really don't notice it as much as you might think that you would. But the head-up display is configurable as well, and one of the things that I really like about that is that when you put it into sports mode, you can also put the head-up display into sports mode, and that means you can have a rev counter built right into your head-up display. I don't think I've seen that on a car before, and I like it very much. We're just driving through the outskirts of a town right now, and I think that's a really good opportunity to talk to you about the fuel economy of this car and also about its more sedate driving functions. Well, I'm happy to tell you that it's very polite and poised when you take it out around town. You don't need to listen to that loud exhaust note all the time if you don't want to. And that's really important, clearly, for taking it in more built-up areas. You really don't want everybody staring at you all of the time. And you do also want to feel that you're able to, say, pick up an elderly relative without having them think that you've just strapped them to the roof of a Formula One car. And it does those things very well. I think what's particularly impressive for me is that everything about this car has been designed around sports performance. That means we have a very low overall weight, very low suspension. We have very thin tires. None of those things traditionally make for a terribly comfortable ride, and some of the roads that we're traveling on are really not that comfortable at all. But here we are with the car configured to be as comfortable as it's possible to make this car, and it really is pretty smooth handling. Let's check with Michelle because he was feeling none too well earlier. We're driving a little more sedately now. Michelle, how are you feeling?
Better.
Better. Better is good. I like better. Now, of course, you guys didn't watch this video only to see me cruising through the hills at a very slow speed, so don't worry, we're going to get back to driving again properly in a little bit. It took us a while, but we did figure out how to reset the overall computer for consumption, and I'm happy to tell you that our overall figures aren't radically different from what the manufacturer claim, but come on, let's be honest. If consumption is your major concern, this is not the car that you're going to be looking at. It has a V8 engine. There's only so much you can do about making that efficient if performance is the reason for the thing existing in the first place. And for my money, I'd much rather that I got the performance than the fuel efficiency in this car. Don't forget, this is a car with a top speed of 250 kilometers per hour, and that's limited. If I buy the driver's package on top, 305. It's more or less a spaceship with wheels on, so my first concern is not going to be fuel efficiency. That said, we do want to make sure that we're getting the most out of what we have, and I think it's a realistic figure to be able to expect this car to deliver you in mixed usage something around about the 14 litres per 100 kilometre mile driven mark. But don't take my word for it, try it out for yourself. So Michelle's promised me he can hold on to his lunch for a little bit longer if we enjoy this car through this road section, and I really did want to give it a little bit of oomph through here. Why? Well, we drove this slightly earlier today, And I can tell you that this piece of road in particular is terrible. There are loads of holes and rolls and uneven bits of surface. And the last time we drove it, the noise was appalling, the handling was abysmal. It just felt like a fairly miserable experience. Well, again, I have the car set up for maximum comfort at the moment. And as you can see, even on video, that really is not negatively impacting on my ability to make the most of the driving experience. What's particularly pleasing to me is the sound. The insulation around the cabin has been really nicely carried out. So even though we're driving on a not great road surface, and we're not driving slowly, we are not being made to suffer hideous amounts of noise or discomfort while we're doing it. Because of the comfort mode, I would also say that there's a really pleasing lack of roll to the drive. Again, I'm not driving as quickly as I could, but I'm also not driving as slowly as I might. Well, we really wanted to be able to bring you this. This is a section of road that is horribly uncomfortable, as you can probably see from my bobbling up and down. But that's a really good spot to show you just quite how effective the different driving modes are. At the moment we're in M1, and that comes pre-configured on the M5 Competition to give you sport for the engine, but comfort from the suspension, the chassis and the steering. Now, you really can get a sense of quite how challenging the road conditions are, I guess by just quite how much this picture is shaking. Now, the M2 paddle is set to give you the most dynamic driving experience that is possible to have. So because of that, they want to make sure you don't select it by mistake. In order to achieve it, you have to hit this button twice. Now, I immediately know that I've gone straight into dynamic mode. My head-up display now features a rev counter. My infotainment system tells me I'm in dynamic mode, and I need to be aware of what that means. I now have a sports engine, sports suspension, sports chassis, sports steering, and most excitingly of all, the DSC is now off. Clearly, you have to be very careful when you're driving in this mode. That's why it takes 2 taps to select it. But I think you can immediately see that although we have a lot of vibrations still happening off this road, considerably more than we did when things were set for comfort, it's still not as bad as you might fear. In terms of the drive, well, that got a whole lot more exciting. I can't really stress enough how horrible this road is, so it isn't the best place to be experiencing everything this car can offer, but come on, we have a racetrack, we can show you that later on. I want to show you real world driving, and that's exactly what this is. I don't know because I can't see the footage, but I can only assume based on what my bottom is currently going through that this is every bit as shaky for you to watch as it is for me to drive. Now, we've done this road already once today, and I can tell you there are some big trucks that come the wrong way up this road, so you have to be paying a lot of attention. But the main thing that you notice when you put this car into full sports and dynamic driving mode is just quite how much opportunity there is for you as a driver to improve your technique and get the best out of this car. It will punish you for any mistakes that you make, but it will also reward you very nicely for any good driving that you do. So it's a lot of fun, but be warned, use it with extreme caution, because there are no second chances when you see a lorry coming the wrong way up a narrow mountain road. Alright, so you bought your M5 Competition, you've taken it out on the road, you've had some fun, but now you really want to open it up and see just what it can do. Well, there's only one place to do that, and that's on the racetrack. I think the first thing to say about this car, and there are a lot of things to say about this car, is it's really quite extraordinary, the amount of control that is now delivered with the M5. You'll have heard a lot of different stories about the M5 ending up in places that it maybe shouldn't have done in past lives. But a lot of those things have been addressed with this new version. The competition is so refined. The first thing you really notice is that reduced height. It delivers such fantastic finesse and speed. The chassis is so taut. The steering is so responsive. And those uprated brakes, well, I'm happy to tell you that they work just fine. Now, in a car that can accelerate from 0 to 100 in 3.3 seconds, it's really going to be important that you have a lot of control. At the moment, we have this car in its standard M1 setting, and that means that whilst I do have a lot of sporty characteristics, I still have my DCS and I still feel nicely in control. In just a while, we're going to take that off and see what happens to the drive of this car. Don't worry, I have checked with BMW that they think I'm competent to do that. Again, it's astonishing how this power is delivered and how it's controlled. We're cruising into this corner at 153, and absolutely nothing wrong with that slowing down or my ability to brake into the corner. Just superb. All right, coming up on the end of this lap here, the sun's still coming up here at Ascari and it's truly beautiful. And I think that's a good time to find out what M2 does. So here we are, DCS now off, and immediately it's amazing the difference to this driving experience. It's a little bit like unleashing a very lively dog. I guess that's how I would describe it. I've gone from having a very sedate, controlled, but powerful experience to what I think I can only describe as a bit of an illusion. It feels like I'm doing a fantastic job of holding this car exactly where it's supposed to be. That's clearly untrue. There's an awful lot of very complicated technology making sure that even though I still now have more control over the power, really the car's keeping me safe on this track. And what a track. So let's talk a little bit about the gear changing. Well, we have Tiptronic gears. I say Tiptronic, BMW calls them Steptronic gears, and they do such a nice job with the gear change. I really don't feel any necessity to take it out of its automatic mode and take control over myself. To be honest, I'm having so much fun driving this car, I really don't need to change anything about the experience at all. Now, I'm getting more power evident in the back of the car now, and a much looser, more ragged feel to the drive, but that only serves to increase the fun. What do you think, Michelle? He's still smiling, and I have to take that as a good, whoa, there we go. There's that power we were talking about. A little bit of moisture still on the track, and that just adds to the fun. I'm not sure if you watched our M2 competition video that we made on the same track yesterday, but it's been a very interesting driving experience for us because we can directly compare how these two cars perform. Now, the M2, I think, is a very different animal, not least with the manual gearbox. What you feel like you're driving, at least, is much more stripped down, much more primal. This is, of course, an executive car, an executive saloon. And that means it's significantly more heavy, significantly more features, significantly more tech, but also a much bigger, more powerful engine. What's extraordinary is the way this weight is controlled within the car. You have so much power at your disposal, but unless you get it wrong, you never feel like you're out of control. Oof. And when you push that weight into the bend, really is something to drive. I would say that if you have your choice between the two, the major difference would be that the M2 competition is going to feel a lot more fun, a lot more primal. This feels like a savage beast that's been tamed just enough to allow you to take it out on this track. And it really is quite extraordinary what you're able to do with it. That's one of those moments when you think, that's coming up pretty quickly. One of the nice things that I mentioned yesterday when we had this car out on the road was that it was really interesting to see the way that the head-up display interacts with the different driving mode that you have selected. Now, that said, if you've been on a racetrack, you'll know you really don't have any time or any interest in what the digital information is telling you. Everything is put into the sound of the engine node. That tells you exactly what you want to know about how the car is performing and whereabouts it is in its power range. Now, of course, with an automatic gearbox, you don't have to worry about that gear shift, but it's still a very pleasant sound to listen to. Some of the journalists have commented that maybe the car doesn't make quite as much noise as they would like, but it's always going to be a trade-off with an executive car. You need that sound deadening, and although you can enhance the sound through the infotainment system, there's something that feels a little bit cheaty about doing it. So for one, I really like the note of the engine. I think it's convincing enough and loud enough to give me a hint as to the power that I'm driving, but it doesn't overwhelm. And even on the racetrack, I still have the ability to have a nice, controlled, casual conversation, even when I'm going around a corner at an insane speed. So this is our last lap on the track now, and it's always the way that you drive your last lap a little slower to allow the car to cool down before it comes out again, and that really is a fantastic opportunity for us just to sum up the experience here. I think I can do it in one word: wow. It's really hard to imagine how you can have a car of this weight with this power that still feels so tight and responsive in the corners, particularly when you push it in really hard. The fact that I haven't heard Michel complain once about the state of his breakfast tells me that it's something of a more refined delivery than the M2 Competition. Does that make it a little bit less fun? Well, possibly. But what do you want? This is an executive car, and because of that, it has to be able to cope with driving lots of people around in great comfort. It's just astonishing that so much comfort can still be so much fun to drive. If you have the chance to take one of these out on the track, I highly recommend it. It really is quite extraordinary what they're capable of achieving. But I think my heart still belongs to the M2. You'll have to give them both a try and tell me what you think. So what is all of this technology going to set you back? Well, entrance pricing comes in at €126,900. That's not cheap, but it is a lot of car for the money. What happens if you want to properly equip it? Well, this car, which also has the driver's pack and those really important ceramic brakes, comes in at around about 149,000. And let's say you're one of those crazy people who says, okay, I have to have absolutely everything. Well, you can imagine the options available for this car are really fairly extensive, and that'll run you somewhere in the region of 170,000. Nobody is realistically going to do that. I would say if you're looking to buy this car, you should be considering around about the 145, 150 mark. Now, those options that I think are absolute must-haves, there's no point buying a car like this unless you really make the most of what it has to deliver. So yes, I would go with the driver's pack, and absolutely I would go with those ceramic brakes. Now, you can't get the driver's pack, and that removes the limiting on it, so you go up to 305 top speed, which is crazy, without BMW offering you a special driver's training course to go with the car. With this kind of power, I heartily recommend it. Even if you're moving from a previously powerful car that you've owned, it's much better to know what you're doing with this piece of equipment, and that will reward you for the entire time you own this vehicle, and is a whole lot cheaper than having to pay for the price of taking care of any mistake you may have made while driving it. Now, because of those extra features, the driver's experience in this car is phenomenal. You have to bear in mind what it is. It's an executive saloon, so you can't expect it to drive like a small sports car. It isn't one. It's a luxury executive saloon for the kind of person who says, yeah, okay, I have to look a certain way, I have to be a certain way, but you know what? When there's no one else around, I can still drive a certain way. And this car delivers that in spades. When you combine the abilities that this car has with its weight and its overall size, it's absolutely extraordinary. I have to be honest, for my taste, my heart still kind of belongs a little bit more with the M2 Competition. But come on, that's because that's just a whole bunch of fun to drive. This is a very serious grown-up car. My comparison between the two would be if you imagine the M2 Competition as the excitable young puppy, full of energy, wanting to run around everywhere. This is the grown-up big dog. It's powerful, but it's controlled. If you like that understated ability to just put a pleasant smile on your face when you cruise down a road 0 to 100 in 3.3 seconds, this car is for you. Now, it isn't cheap, but none of its competition is either. So if driving is your #1 priority in an executive car, this is well worth looking at. For the rest of us that don't quite play in that price range, well, at least we can look and dream, and I really like the styling improvements that they've brought to this line. I personally think having a standalone competition model within the M series is a really good move on the part of BMW. All cars are compromises one way or another between one thing they're trying to achieve and another, and here we see the absolute best of both worlds, a car that is extremely comfortable and luxurious to drive whilst being an immense amount of fun. So, if you have €150,000 waiting to spend on your next executive car, I highly recommend you take a look. Until then, maybe you know somebody else who does, and you can convince them to get one and let you have a go. It's a great car. We've had a great time reviewing it. I hope you've had a great time watching it too. Please, if you have any comments or questions, pop them below. Please subscribe, and we hope we'll see you all again soon.